Dylan and the Dead, a live record of the tour belatedly issued in 1989, only served to highlight that. As a stage act, Dylan had perhaps reached a new low.
In Pearl's the worst ever live albums, it's a regular feature. I mean, it's really rank. It's just shoddy. I mean, it just. One story I heard was they just sort of played Dylan a load of tapes, and he just said, "Oh yeah, it's fine." You know, he just didn't even care. I mean, I honestly think I've just played that album once, and that's it. I can't believe it. I can't believe that any Bob Dylan fan or any Grateful Dead fan has played that record more than once.
You know, it's like, what was his frame of mind when he did those Dead concerts? What was the Dead's frame of mind? On both Dylan and the Dead's side, there was a strange combination of resolute stubbornness and real weary cynicism. That I'm not saying that it was simply cynical. I don't believe either of them was simply cynical, as I think some other old rock bands become. I think that they definitely believed, or at least wanted to believe, in what they were doing. And I don't think they weren't trying. However, they were tuckered out. There were, in Jerry Garcia's case, documented substance abuse problems. One hears rumors about Dylan having the same kinds of problems. I have no idea whatsoever whether they're more than rumors. None. And they could very well be more than rumors, since every kind of rumor follows Dylan. I really don't know. Somebody does. I don't. But I think about his affect of that time, and certainly his affect would be one thing that might cause those rumors to begin, having nothing to do with the facts. A certain detachment, a certain, what the fuck am I doing here? And then that goes away, doesn't it?
Dylan had a meeting with a publicist in New York whom I know, and she said to him, "What is it you want?" You know, I mean, I'm a publicist, you know, and the answer to that question is typically, you know, I want the cover of Time, or I want, you know, those kinds of pragmatic things. And Dylan's answer was, I want to keep doing this. I want to be able to keep doing this. And I think that there was a sense in which he understood that he was losing his audience. And even as he'd never pandered to the audience, you know, I think he wanted an audience to be there, not to pander to. You know, and I think that there was a sense in which, you know, along around the late 80s, people were just going, okay, I'm done. I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine, very smart person, loves music, who just kind of said, you know, these Dylan shows and these records are getting so bad that I'm now beginning to go back and question the good stuff. And I think once your audience is in that place, you're in a lot of trouble.
A new studio album confirmed the decline in Dylan's fortunes. Released in May 1988, Down in the Groove was a collection of mostly collaborations and covers recorded during the chaotic sessions of the previous 6 years. It met with unanimously bad reviews and failed to break the US Top 60. Coming after Hearts of Fire and the Grateful Dead debacle, the album suggested that Dylan had become an artist running on empty.
Dark days for Dylan fans. It's not a good record, but there are some good things on it. He did Rank Strangers to Me. Death Is Not the End is very poignant. Nice version of Shenandoah, the old folk song. I mean, there's 3 or 4 good tracks on there, but not great. And a lot of them weren't Dylan originals either. He was co-writing with Robert Hunter out of the Grateful Dead. All the albums are coming in like sort of 35 minutes. You know, it's almost like he's just given up caring, really.
Not Downloaded and Down in the Groove, I think, are records that indicate a certain kind of crisis of confidence in Dylan. You know, there's there's co-writing and songs by other people, and I really, much more so than on the Christian records, certainly, you know, there's a sense of, who am I? You know, and I think that the mid 80s, were not a good period for somebody like Bob Dylan. There was this sense of, all of these new elements coming into the music industry, MTV, everything's like really bright, everything's really loud, everything's really kind of synthetic seeming. And, for whatever else he may have played around with, Dylan, was kind of a pretty crunchy guy. I mean, it's he's kind of a roots musician. And, how exactly you make a record like that in the mid 80s, I think was confounding. And I think it affected his ability to write songs and even write lyrics.
You just got 2 Bob Dylan songs that he wrote himself and 2 that he wrote with others. So you've got 4 songs of which Bob Dylan's a participant in the songwriting process. I mean, that's how bad it was getting in terms of Dylan's writer's block. But funny enough, there was a way out. Down the Groove did have certain moments which only in retrospect, I mean, I wouldn't, I certainly didn't spot them at the time and think, there's a way forward here. But, on reflection and in retrospect, you can see it. Silvio, Shenandoah, and again, the final track, the Stanley Brothers cover that he does, all this relates back to past forms. There's country blues there for a start, but there's also, with the Stanley Brothers, you get the bluegrass. And Dylan seems quite comfortable with those songs, and they are very, very effective. And you also find that the minimalist instrumentation helps, and it's just good to hear Dylan. He sounds natural again.
Everybody I met seemed to be a rank stranger, no mother or dad. I found they were all rank strangers to me.
That music is almost kind of like early Americana or all country, which it became later down the line. But it's Dylan connecting with earlier song forms, and he seems very comfortable going back. And that's in many ways the story of the final stage of Dylan's career, is this going back into earlier song forms, going back into the past in order to rediscover a future route, and he's done that amazingly successfully since then. But I think the genesis of that can be seen in those moments.
With his career in danger of flatlining, Dylan's need to resolve the question of his place in the 1980s was brought into sharp focus. Intriguingly, and with an unexpected push from chance, he seemed to abandon the project of finding a modern identity altogether. A request from ex-Beatle George Harrison to use Dylan's home recording studio led to an unlikely collection of rock grandees meeting for jam sessions at his house in Malibu. Dylan and Harrison were joined by Roy Orbison, Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne of the Electric Light Orchestra for 10 days of writing and recording. These songs would appear in October '88 as The Travelling Wilburys Volume 1. The album was an enormous double platinum success and represented a complete break from mainstream 80s music, with a return to the Americana and roots rock heritage of its pseudonymous players.
I'm so tired of being lonely. I still have some love to give. Won't you show me that you really care? Everybody's got somebody to lean on. Put your body next to mine and dream on.
It's a lot of people getting together and having some fun and somehow re-accessing a certain kind of simplicity. And that's a record in which, what is it really like? What it's really like is the band, but what the band never was. By the time they were making records, the band wasn't. This is the pre-recorded, the pre-serious American Mythopoeia road band that Dale Hawkins and the Hawks were. It's like a joke recreation of that band, with a lot of firepower, vocally, songwriting-wise, playing-wise. It could have been an utter travesty, and it wasn't a travesty. It's a good record.
Maybe he thought he had to kind of lift his game, or maybe he was just enjoying being part of something that wasn't just about him. Because, yeah, I mean, you know, he would have been in a position, not necessarily through any fault of his own, where, you know, he spent his entire adult life feeling that the world revolves around him and being the centre of attention everywhere he's gone and everything he's done, and all of a sudden he's not anymore. He's part of a whole. And I think you would have to be a fairly far-gone curmudgeon to find anything to seriously dislike about that record. I mean, looked at as an objective piece of work, Dylan's presence on it is not, it's not the most noteworthy thing. I mean, Roy Orbison absolutely steals it, and it's very much a kind of career swan song for him, who, you know, died not long afterwards. I do also think that because there were a couple of videos on it which got absolutely caned all over the world by MTV and similar programs, then all of a sudden I think you may have had, I mean, by this stage you've got 10 or 12 years worth of young music fans, which is 2 generations at least of you know, record buyers, who, if they regarded Bob Dylan at all, would have regarded him as this sort of like sour, stony-faced, whining obscurantist crank who made some records their parents listened to when they were at university. And then all of a sudden he's on MTV, he looks like an approachable and interesting figure who's making some really good records, and I think it probably did him no harm at that point that there were probably lots of 14 or 15-year-olds asking their parents, who is this guy?
You can sit around and wait for the phone to ring, waiting for someone to tell you everything. Sit around and wonder what tomorrow will bring. Maybe a diamond ring.
George Harrison said about that project afterwards, you know, if it's re-energized, re-enthused Bob, then it was worth it, whether the record is any good or not. It is emblematic of Dylan realizing that chasing fashionability is a waste of time. You know, the Travelling Wilburys is about a bunch of guys grinning and picking together, really. You know, I mean, it's almost back porch type stuff, at least in its sentiment, if not its sound.
And it was in looking back that Dylan finally found a way forward. Following the Wilburys sessions, he embarked on the first dates of what would become known as the Never-Ending Tour, the travelling live show of a reinvigorated elder statesman of rock and nearly 3 decades worth of songs. He was also revisited by the organic and introspective songwriting muse of earlier times. After being made privy to some of the new material, U2's lead singer Bono suggested that selecting the right producer was vital to the success of a new record, and talked up the merits of Canadian musician Daniel Lanois, whose work with Brian Eno on the Joshua Tree had been instrumental in U2's breakout success.